Octave has two senses in Christian liturgical usage. In the first sense, it is the eighth day after a feast, reckoning inclusively, and so always falls on the same day of the week as the feast itself. The word is derived from a Latin octava, with dies understood. In the second sense, the term is applied to the whole period of these 8 days, during which certain major feasts came to be observed. Octaves, not being successive, are quite distinct from 8-day weeks and simply refer to the return of the same day of a 7-day week in the inclusive counting system used in Latin. Early history. The eighth day, or octava dies, was associated with the weekly Christian celebration of the resurrection of Christ every eighth day, which became a name for Sunday. As circumcision was performed on the eighth day after birth, the number 8 became associated also with baptism, and baptismal fonts have from an early date often been octagonal. The practice of octaves was first introduced under Constantine I, when the dedication festivities of the basilicas at Jerusalem and Tyre, Lebanon were observed for 8 days. After these one-off occasions, annual liturgical feasts began to be dignified with an octave. The first such feasts were Easter, Pentecost, and, in the East, Epiphany. This occurred in the 4th century and served as a period of time for the newly baptized to take a joyful retreat. The development of octaves occurred slowly. For the 4th century to the 7th century, Christians observed octaves with the celebration on the 8th day, with little development of the liturgies of the intervening days. Christmas was the next feast to receive an octave. By the 8th century, Rome had developed liturgical octaves not only for Easter, Pentecost, and Christmas, but also for the Epiphany and the feast of the dedication of the Church. For the 7th century, saints' feasts also began to have octaves, among the oldest being the feasts of Saints Peter and Paul, St. Lawrence and St. Agnes. From the 12th century, the custom developed of liturgical observance of the days between the 1st and the 8th day, as well as the 8th day. During the Middle Ages, octaves for various other feasts and saints were celebrated depending upon the diocese or religious order. Modern history. From Pius V to Pius XII after 1568, when Pope Pius V reduced the number of octaves, they were still numerous, not only on the 8th day from the feast but on all the intervening days. The liturgy was the same as on the feast itself, with exactly the same prayers and scripture readings. Octaves were classified into several types. Easter and Pentecost had specially privileged octaves, during which no other feast whatsoever could be celebrated. Christmas, Epiphany, and Corpus Christi had privileged octaves, during which certain highly ranked feasts might be celebrated. The octaves of other feasts allowed even more feasts to be celebrated. To reduce the repetition of the same liturgy for several days, Pope Leo XIII and Pope Pius X made further distinctions, classifying octaves into 3 primary types: privileged octaves, common octaves, and simple octaves. Privileged octaves were arranged in a hierarchy of first, second, and third orders. For the first half of the 20th century, octaves were ranked in the following manner, which affected holding other celebrations within the time frames: privileged octaves of the first order, octave of Easter, octave of Pentecost, privileged octaves of the second order, octave of Epiphany, octave of Corpus Christi, privileged octaves of the third order, octave of Christmas, octave of the Ascension, octave of the Sacred Heart, common octaves, octave of the Immaculate Conception, BVM, octave of the Solemnity of Saint Joseph, octave of the Nativity of St. John the Baptist, octave of S's. Peter and Paul Octave of the Assumption BVM Octave of All Saints, Simple Octaves Octave of St. Stephen Octave of St. John the Apostle Octave of the Holy Innocents Octave of St. Lawrence Octave of the Nativity BVM. In addition to these, the patron saint of a particular nation, diocese, or church was celebrated with an octave, on each day of which the Mass and office of the feast was repeated, unless impeded by another celebration. Although the feasts of St. Lawrence and the Nativity of the Blessed Virgin Mary officially still had simple octaves, by the 20th century they had all but vanished as higher-ranking feasts were added to the calendar. The octave day alone of St. Lawrence was still commemorated during the Mass of St. Hyacinth. The entire octave of the Nativity of the Blessed Virgin Mary was impeded, but the Most Holy Name of Mary was celebrated during the octave, and the Seven Sorrows of the Blessed Virgin Mary was celebrated on the former octave day. Reduction by Pius XII and Paul VI. Pope Pius XII simplified the calendar with a decree dated the 23rd of March 1955. Only the octaves of Christmas, Easter and Pentecost were kept, octaves that differed from the others in not repeating the same liturgy daily. All other octaves in the Roman Rite were suppressed, including those in local calendars. In 1969, the Roman Catholic Church further revised the Roman calendar by removing the octave of Pentecost. The first 8 days of the Easter season make up the octave of Easter and are celebrated as solemnities of the Lord, with proper readings and prayers. Since the 30th of April 2000, the second Sunday of Easter, which concludes the Easter octave, has also been called Divine Mercy Sunday. The Christmas Octave is arranged as follows: Sunday within the octave, Feast of the Holy Family, celebrated on Friday, December 30th, when Christmas is a Sunday. The 26th of December, Feast of St. Stephen. The 27th of December, Feast of John the Apostle. The 28th of December, Feast of the Holy Innocents. 29 to 31 December, days within the octave with assigned readings and prayers, on which the celebration of optional memorials is permitted according to special rubrics. The 1st of January, Octave Day of the Nativity, Solemnity of Mary, Mother of God. Eastern Christian usage. Among the Eastern Orthodox and Byzantine Rite Eastern Catholic churches, what in the West would be called an octave is referred to as an afterfeast. The celebration of the great feasts of the church year are extended for a number of days, depending upon the particular feast. Each day of an afterfeast will have particular hymns assigned to it, continuing the theme of the feast being celebrated. Most of these great feasts also have a day or more of preparation called a forefeast. Forefeasts and afterfeasts will affect the structure of the services during the canonical hours. The last day of an afterfeast is called the apodosis of the feast. On the apodosis, most of the hymns that were chanted on the first day of the feast are repeated. On the apodosis of feasts of the Theotokos, the epistle and gospel of the feast are repeated again at the Divine Liturgy. Non-liturgical usage. The term octave is applied to some church observances that are not strictly liturgical. For example, many churches observe an annual octave of prayer for Christian unity, which runs from the 18th of January to the 25th of January. This title has tended to be replaced by Week of Prayer for Christian Unity, but it is still often referred to as an octave, especially within the Roman Catholic and Anglo-Catholic traditions. Each year, Luxembourg holds what is called the Octaves Celebration from the 3rd to the 5th Sunday after Easter, 15 instead of 8 days, in honor of Our Lady of Luxembourg, patroness of the city.